friends? Ooh, sorry, friends. I'm super on. Hi, friends. How's it going? I'm Pastor Kelly. Hi to everyone on the live stream. Today, we get to talk about Ruth in the Bible. Honest confession time. Raise your hand if you know anything about Ruth from the Bible. Yeah, crickets, right, yeah. Nobody ever knows anything about her. And I was just chatting with Scott. One of the reasons is she gets a whole book. Like, she's in the table of contents, and most people don't know anything about her because we don't normally read about her in church. So you could come to church every Sunday your whole life, and you may have never heard a story about her. So it's not your fault, but now you will know because we get to talk about her, and she totally rocks. Okay, but first, we're just going to gather ourselves and get ready for the day. I need a volunteer. Well, let's do a great big breath prayer. Breath and spirit is the same word in the Bible. So let's breathe in, breathe out. One more time. Out. Okay, now that the Holy Spirit is with us, who's going to say our prayer for us? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, wait, let me give you this so the people at home can hear you praying. I know, but it helps me.
Gracious God, we give you thanks for the gift of family. Thank you for the people in our lives who are loyal to us and give us support and encouragement. Be with us as we learn how to follow the example of your servant Ruth in order to be loyal and faithful members of our family. Open our eyes, ears, hearts, and minds to what you will teach us. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. We have some great updates. There's some options to volunteer. We need a dessert baker coming up the next 3 Sundays. I don't even know what that means, but I should show up here and eat desserts. And then open table is on November 20th. Food pantry is going to happen on November 16th. That's 2 weeks from today. So bring food from home or bring money from home, and we're going to have a little competition during pizza. So on that day, if you come at 6, there will be pizza downstairs, a little Price is Right friendly competition I'm bringing. This is different than other years. So your small group might earn bonus bucks to buy food for the food pantry, and then your group might win. So it would be really fun. So join us for that. Okay, another piece of announcement I have is Wisconsin Dells. We're going to go to something called Quake. Have any of you been to Quake before? Ooh. Scott, what is it like?
It's fun. It's
fun.
It's here at a water park, and there's between 500 and 1,000 people there, and they have music and games and speakers, and it's a lot of fun. It's great.
I have heard that this is exciting, but I've never been. And so this year's theme is Reignite. We're going to Wisconsin Dells in February. 6th through 12th graders are invited to come. You can bring a friend, and it totally rocks. We're going to stay in a hotel, go to the water park, learn about God, hang out with friends, and I even have a little video to show you all about it. Let's try this over here.
Can we see there?
Yes. It's not all dancing, no. I saw some Hungry Hungry Hippos being played, which looked like fun. There's some workshops. There's a service project. You get to sleep at the hotel for 2 nights. We're going to have meals together. Yeah, we're going on Friday. We come back on Sunday. You get to miss church for this because you'll do church at it. So I'm coming. It'll be really fun. So if you want to go, I've got some papers here for you to take home because there's a cost and there's an RSVP date, and so we need to know by Thanksgiving if you can go so that we can get our hotel rooms for our group. Okay, today's big story is about Ruth and has a lot to do with family and it has a lot to do with moving. Now, God intended for us to be in families. I'm sorry, is your hand up? No? Okay. God intended for us to be in families that are loving and supportive, and that's the goal. And hopefully, if you ever had to move, there was some happiness involved in it. But sometimes talking about families and moving can be really hard because of something that happened to you. So if that happens, I totally get it. If you need to step out or talk with your small group leader about something, that is okay. No problems. But hopefully, we'll be able to have this really great story today. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with my family story, but I want you all to stand up and get in this back area back here because we're going to wiggle and find some folks in your group, okay? So everyone stand up, go this way. All right, so you're going to wiggle, bring as few things as you can. No, you get to hang out with 3 to 12 of your closest friends. Yeah, you'll all have beds. Okay, you're all going to move this way because when I say you're going to try and put yourself in groups. So the first group is find everyone who has the same number of total siblings. So count up all your siblings. You might have step siblings, half siblings, full siblings, and then make a group. So everyone with 0 siblings is in a group. Everyone with 12 siblings is in a group. You need to make yourself into a group of total number of siblings, whether they currently live in your house or not. Find your friends, total number of siblings, folks at home. How many siblings you got? I have 1 sibling. So like there's me and 1 other person. So my number is 1, not 2.
2's are over here.
Okay. All right. How many people have 0 siblings? How many people have 1 sibling? That's me. Are we at one group? We're kind of like, here, I'll help us be a group. How many people have 2 siblings? How many people have 3 siblings? How many people have more than 3 siblings? That's it. That's our max. Okay. Now, think about how many of your siblings are currently living in the same house as you. So like I have 1, but I have 0 in my house. So I need you to mix up into your peeps. I currently have 0 of my siblings living at home. So we're over here with 0. This is our 0 group. Maybe you have 12 siblings at home.
2, both in house.
Okay, we have some leaders in this group here. Alrighty, so we have 0. Who has 1 sibling at home? Anyone? That whole group has 1 sibling at home. Who has 2 siblings at home? Who has 3? There we go. Okay, now you're going to do the same birth order. So for example, I'm the oldest kid in my house and of all my siblings, so I'm going to find other oldest kids. If you're the second of 3, that's a middle child, or if you're the youngest, so you might be the oldest, the middle, the youngest, the only. Find a group. I'm oldest. Are you oldest? We're oldest. Oh, well, apparently we're going this way. Are you the oldest? You are good at being a leader. We olders are leaders. That's what we do. We lead people. Are you the oldest child? Are you not a leader? Yeah, you are. See, it happens. No? You're the oldest? Okay. Who's the oldest? Who's the middle kid? All the middles? Who's the youngest? Awesome sauce. Is anyone kind of both? You're kind of both? Like, yeah? Okay. So, like, maybe you're the youngest of the ones in your house, but, like, maybe you have, like, a step-sibling that lives in another state, and officially they count, but you're like, well, I don't know, I don't live with them. Okay, that happens. Okay, now you want to find somebody who has the same number of either step-siblings or half-siblings. So if you have step-siblings or half-siblings or cousins you count as siblings, count that number up. And then if you have none, then you're in the 0 group. 0 is a number. We've discovered it 1,000 years ago. It's a number.
No, it's not a number.
I mean, if you're 0, we don't have a lot of step families in this group.
0.
If you have no stepless siblings or half siblings, then you're over here. This is the 0 group. Only if they live in your house. Like sometimes they count as part of your, families are confusing. We don't need to get into all the details. We have a lot of people with no step families. Come on, we're all missing out. Okay, that's fine. Now I want you to count up all your cousins on your dad's side and your mom's side and find a group. Just first cousins. Yes, just first cousins.
Oh, wait, then none.
Find a group of people with the same number of first cousins. You can count them if you want to. Yes. How many cousins? I got to count. I got. Greater than 10. I have 5. You have no cousins. That's a crazy time. 5. There's a 10 and greater group over there. 6. Anybody have 5? Are you 5? You're 4. Who has 5? Okay, we have 0. Who has 1 cousin only? Wowzers. Who has 2 cousins? Who has 3 cousins? Who has 4 cousins? Who has 5 cousins? Who has 6? Who has 7? Who has 8? Who has 9? Who has 10 or more? We got the big families over there. All right, folks, you can take a seat. That is A-okay. Good job. Give yourself a pat on the back. Give yourself a pat on the back for being amazing. You're good at math and good at knowing your families. That's like 2 wins for one day. Right. Okay. Families can sometimes be confusing, and a lot of what we've been learning about in the Old Testament has to do with families. So we're going to review a little bit. Who remembers what we've learned so far this year in confirmation, just in September? Who remembers what we've learned? I mean, Scott knows. I know. Anybody else? You think you know the whole thing?
No.
Okay, you know something.
Yeah.
What do you know?
That there's like 66 books in the Bible.
That is good. Yes, we have learned that there are 66 books in the Bible. What else did we learn? Yes, Abraham was going to kill his kid. We're not going to talk about that part of the family today, but it's definitely a story. Who else remembers something in the Old Testament that we learned so far? Yeah. No, we didn't learn that part yet. Yeah. Abraham was 100 years old. Great. Okay, does anyone remember anything we learned from the Bible that happened before Abraham? Now, I'll grant you, that was only 12 whole chapters in, so, it's not very far. But did you remember anything before that? What happened before Abraham? We kind of started there. Yeah. Right. God made the world and then sin happened. It's pretty basic. And then we kind of scooted ahead to Abraham's story. Who remembers who came after Abraham? Abraham's son that he almost killed everybody? Isaac. And then Isaac's son, he had 2. That was Abraham had Ishmael. Isaac had, they were twins. Oh, Scott remembers. Jacob and Esau, right? Okay, I'll help you out. So first we had creation. God made the world, and then sin happened. Patriarchs are the really important people. Abraham had Isaac, had Jacob, had 12 kids, and then they went to somewhere. Then the Exodus happened. Who remembers what's Exodus? Yeah? Good? Good. What is it? Moses was in Exodus. Yes, they exited. They moved. Yes. Then something happened called conquest and some more stuff. So far we have done 3 pictures of the Old Testament. If you have a basic understanding of what they are, give yourself a pat on the back because you rock. Now I'm going to zoom in a smidge. So I'm trying to see if I have a pointer. Oh, I do. All right, so we talked about this. God made the world. Sin happened. We did not talk about the flood, but you have a general sense the flood happened. There was an ark. Okay, good. Patriarchs, we talked about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We talked about slavery. Moses was in the Exodus. Then after they left, they were in some place called the wilderness for 40 years. Now, who knows what the word conquest means? Conquest. Am I saying it right? It sounds funny now. Yes, to conquer something. What does that mean? All the way in the back.
Take over.
Yes, conquest means takeover. So, they left where? Moses led them out of what country? Everybody? Egypt. And led them into what country? Moses led them nowhere. They just hung out in the middle of nowhere. He apparently, after all that moving, had lost his internal GPS. But a dude named Joshua led them into a good place they called the Promised Land, and later they called it Israel. Bonus points to both. Okay, so a guy named Joshua took 5 years of conquering this land and moving them in. We're not going to read it. It's really interesting. Then they have 300 years of judges. And judges means all sorts of interesting things we'll talk about in just a minute. Today we're going to learn about Ruth. Her book happens during the time of Judges. We're not going to talk about this, and then next week you're going to move on. Okay, so you talked about Abraham and Sarah. What did God promise Abraham and Sarah? 2 things. Not just one kid, but what? Yes, like a whole bunch. And then something else. The map is the hint. What was the second thing? What is it? Very close. He had a home, though. So what was cool about this home? That's a good guess. God promised that he'd have a land of his own, the promised land, that his descendants would have this particular land. Back then, that really mattered a lot. So that happened. So, did God's promises come true? Did they get those things? Yeah. Abraham and Sarah had a couple kids, and they moved to Canaan. Great. God promised to make of Abraham and Sarah, everybody think of this, a great nation, people who would never be scared, perfect models of faith, leaders in the church. Show me with your hands. A, B, C, D. What do you think? We're struggling. Did you all say A? Okay, so this is the complicated family tree. You told me this. Abram had how many wives? Nope. No. At the same time? No. Huh. Right. Abraham had 2 wives, but only one at a time. Hagar was not his wife. Abraham had how many kids?
3.
There's only 3 up here, but he actually had quite a few.
Father Abraham had 7 sons.
No, it's many sons, but that's a good guess. That's a really good guess. So, Abraham had the 2 that we know of, Isaac and Ishmael, and then later he had this other wife who had like 6 kids. Okay, then Isaac had Jacob and Esau. Jacob had how many wives? 2. But how many women did he have babies with? 4. So he had 2 wives and 2 other ladies. And how many kids did he have? 12. Okay. So here's why nobody tells you about this in Sunday school, because there's not a nice way to say that all the people in our Bible had a bunch of wives and mistresses and random kids they didn't talk about. Sometimes they wanted to kill them. There's not a polite way to mention that, okay? Not a lot of this was God's plan, but people did it. And we can't just ignore that all these kids happened. So here's the messy tree. Yeah. Yes. So he was married to Leah and to Rachel, and they were sisters. And then he also had babies with these other ladies. So he had a total of at least 12 sons. Yes. That is not something we do anymore. I don't recommend it. So, yes, Leah and Rachel were sisters, and these are 2 other ladies, and they all hung out. They had 12 sons. We don't know how many daughters. Only one is named. One of their sons, Joseph, got sold and went to where? Slavery in Egypt. And that's eventually how they got to Egypt, right? Because they're here, so you knew all this. So, Joseph gets sold and he moves to Egypt. And then who's this guy from last week? Why did they sell him? They didn't like him. They just didn't like their brother, so they decided selling him into slavery was a good answer. Not a good answer, but they did it. I mean, there's a long story. So then he moves to Egypt. This is where they were. He moved to Egypt. Who's this guy again from last week? Pharaoh. What does Pharaoh mean? What's his job? He's the king of Egypt. So, how did the Pharaoh feel about Joseph? Yeah.
He did not like Joseph because he felt.
That's Moses. Oh, did we not talk about this?
I think at first he didn't like Joseph, but then he did because he gave him good information.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so at first Pharaoh didn't know Joseph, then he liked him. But after Joseph died, right, so Joseph brought the whole family, all these people and all their kids, 70 folks, all packed up on camels, no joke, and walked all the way over to Egypt because this guy had a job with the Pharaoh. So they were like, that's a good reason, let's move for work. So 70 of them all moved, lived there, and that was great, but that Pharaoh died, and then Joseph died, and later we learned what happened to the Israelites, or the children of Israel in Egypt. His brothers sold him, yes. And then later, he saved their life when they were going to die, and they decided they liked him again, so they came back to live with him. Yes, they were jealous of this coat because it's gorgeous. That does seem extreme, but that is what happened. Yes, that is exactly what happened. Right. So sidetrack, we don't actually know what kind of coat he had. It might have been multicolored, it might have been striped, it might have had sleeves. The only other time we talk about this coat is when it is something that a princess would wear. So there's a solid chance that he and his mom were besties, and he was probably wearing girls' clothes, and his brothers had a lot of work to do to take care of all the animals, and thought that he was getting off easy because he was his dad's favorite and didn't have to work. They didn't like that. So anyway, he saves them, but this is last week's story. They're all in Egypt doing what? What bad thing is happening to them in Egypt? Slavery. Slavery is always bad. Okay, so slavery happens, and then how do they get out of slavery, friends? What? Plagues happen, Passover happens. What's this thing? Nope.
It's the passing of these.
Yes, they're walking through the water where there should be water, but there's not, right? Yeah, this is the Exodus. Passover and Exodus. Yay! Okay, so far you remembered everything from confirmation, so you get an A+. Yay, this is good news. Okay, then, what does a plague mean? It's plague, not plaque. Who says A? B? C? D? Calamity. Hopefully you know what calamity means. Okay. Now, this is what the Jewish folks still do this every year in the spring to celebrate what God did for them. This is just from last week. You were all paying attention. You know this stuff. Is it Feast of Remembrance, Hanukkah, Passover, Moses Day? Moses Day sounds fun. Who says A? Who says B? Who says C? It's C. Hanukkah happens later. Okay, this is Passover. That's what you learned last week. So, why did God take the people out of Egypt? So they could go to the New World, go to the land of Midian, go to the land of Oz, go to the Promised Land. Promised Land. Who remembers where that Promised Land is? This is way back from our story about Abraham. Do you remember? Where is it? Yes, Israel or Canaan, right? Yes, go to the Promised Land. So they go back there, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So far you did all of this. So God made the world, there was a flood, there was a bunch of people, they were in slavery for 400 years, Moses got them out of slavery, Joshua conquered the Promised Land, and then they lived there. So they live in this Promised Land for 300 years, and during that time they have 12 different leaders that the Bible calls judges, and they're all in the book of Judges. But here's the thing about these judges. First off, there is one lady judge. Her name's Deborah. She seems to be a favorite. There's 12 different judges over 300 years. They don't really judge the way our judges do. There weren't courtrooms back then. They had judges instead of having kings. Because remember, when they were in slavery, who put them into slavery? A king. So they didn't really want a king, so God sent these judges instead to sort of tell them the right things to do. But here's what happens in the book of Judges. First, there is peace. World is great. Then Israel does something wrong. Something that God told them not to do. When they do something wrong, God disciplines them, or they get in trouble. Something bad happens. Then they repent. What does repent mean? They say they're sorry, and then God sends a judge to deliver them, and then they have some more peace. And then what happens after a few years of peace, everybody? They rebel again. And when they rebel, what does God do? And then when they finally get disciplined, what do? They repent and say, I'm sorry. So God does what? Sends a judge, and the judge does a good job, so then they have what? And this goes over 12 times. Okay, so it happens 12 times in the book of Judges. But here's what do you think discipline means? So Israel rebels, and then discipline happens. What are some ways in which God disciplines us? Is discipline good, bad, middle? Right. Maybe something bad happens. Probably not a plague, but something bad. What do we think? That was a rainbow? We did that one. Good times. Yep, no floods. Got it. Well, here's what ends up happening. A lot of times the discipline is a conflict with another country, because remember how they really wanted this particular piece of land as their promised land? How long did it take Joshua to get into that promised land? 5 years, because other people lived there. And that land is right next to the water, and it's all desert. So what do you think the other countries feel about all of these Israelites being right next to all the yummy, yummy water that's great? How do you think these other countries feel about it? They want it a lot. So they're often coming in to try and take their land from them. How do you think that makes the Israelites feel about all those other countries? Do they like them? Are they like, oh, sure, come on over, have some water, we'll be friends, we'll play bridge? Is that what they're doing? They're angry. They like to fight, right? So this cycle involves a lot of fighting, and every time it happens, there's another nation that they're mad at. So I'm going to go way back to this. I should have a better way of doing this. There's a lot of people they get angry at, like they get really angry at the Midianites. They think the Midianites are trying to kill them. Then they get really angry at the Moabites. They think the Moabites are trying to kill them. Then they get really angry at the Ammonites. Pretty sure the Ammonites are going to kill them. And this continues for 12 judges, 300 years, okay? So, did God ever say that everyone in Moab is a horrible person? No. Did God ever say that everyone in Midian is a horrible person? No. Do you think God wanted all the Israelites to just hate all those other countries, that when he said, this is your promised land, he meant kill everyone else? Yeah, probably not, right? Okay, I'm glad you're thinking clearly. But because they thought these other countries were attacking them, they started to really, really not like them. So today's story, Ruth, happens in the middle of all that fighting. It's a lovely story about not fighting. So that's why we're going to talk about it, because it's great. There's not a lot of fighting. There are crazy families, because there's a lot of crazy families. So Ruth is not born into a Hebrew or Jewish or Israelite family, all the same. So she's not born into that family. She's born in a country called Moab. But during the story, she chooses loyalty to Naomi, who is Jewish, and Naomi's family and God, and then God chooses Ruth to be part of her family. It's a super interesting story, but we need a little break, and so we need to think about our own families. So here's what you're going to do. I want you to try and think of 3 words that describe your family. I'm going to give you 30 whole seconds to think. You can scribble on paper if your leader has one, and then you're going to share at least one of those words with your group. So I have all sorts of options here that you might choose to describe your family. So for example, my brother's really competitive, but I'm not, so that word would not describe our whole family. But my brother and I are both really loud and really loving. We are both. We're just a lot of everything. So that's something we have in common, would be a word that would describe our whole family. So I want you to think. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Think. 3 words that describe your family. Okay, talk to your small group guide about at least one word that you came up with that describes your family. You 4 get to chat with me. Did you come up with a word for your family? Yeah? How many of you came up with a positive word about your family? How many of your brains were thinking of a maybe less than positive word for, that happens. Sometimes families are a little bit of both, and that is A-okay. That happens in Ruth's family too. So now we're going to talk about our 3 words: loyalty, faithful, and family. So chat with your group and see if you can come up with a definition that you like for loyal or loyalty, faithful, and family. How would you define them? What do you think? Folks, we were struggling because loyal and faithful are so similar. Was anyone able to come up with a definition of them? Yes. Which one do you want to tell me? Okay. Faithful is keeping your faith in God, staying true to God. Okay.
Family is like people you can go to.
People you can go to. We had a good family definition over here. What was that one? People that accept you. You don't even have to be related to them. I love that. Yeah. Loyalty is sticking by someone at all times. Okay, you're pretty good at this. The book said that loyalty is like devotion or attachment to something, that you can be loyal to a person or a place or an idea or a thing. Faithful is that you're steadfast, firm. A family is a group of people who are connected to one another. So I feel like you all did a good job. Okay, now we're going to watch a video about the book of Ruth because this is faster than me trying to explain it. Okay? Well, hold on. I got to make sure my volume's all the way up. It is. Okay.
The Book of Ruth is a brilliant work of theological art, and it invites us to reflect on the question of how God is involved in the day-to-day joys and hardships of our lives. There are three main characters in the book: Naomi, the widow, Ruth, the Moabite, and Boaz, the Israelite farmer. And their story is told in 4 chapters that are beautifully designed. Let's just dive in and see how this all unfolds. Chapter 1 opens with this line: "In the days when the judges ruled." And it reminds us of the very dark and difficult days from the book of Judges. And here we meet an Israelite family in Bethlehem, struggling to survive through a famine. And so in search of food, they move on to the land of Moab, Israel's ancient enemy. And there the father of the family dies. The sons marry 2 Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And then the sons, they die too. And so they leave only Naomi and these new daughters-in-law. And so Naomi, she has no reason to stay anymore. And so she tells her new daughters-in-law that she's moving back home. And Naomi, she knows that the life of an unmarried foreign widow in Israel is going to be very hard. And so she compels the women to stay behind. Orpah agrees, but Ruth does not. She shows remarkable loyalty to Naomi, and she says, "Wherever you go, I'm going to go. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God." And so the two of them return to Israel together. And the chapter concludes with Naomi changing her name to Mara, which means bitter in Hebrew, and she laments her tragic fate. Chapter 2 begins with Naomi and Ruth discussing where they're going to find food, and it just so happens to be the beginning of the barley harvest. And so Ruth goes out to look for food, and it just so happens that she ends up picking grain in the field of a man named Boaz, who just so happens to be Naomi's relative. We're told that Boaz is a man of noble character, and he notices Ruth. And so after finding out more about her story, he shows remarkable generosity to her. He makes these special provisions so that the immigrant Ruth can gather grain in his field. And in doing so, Boaz is actually obeying an explicit command of the Torah to show generosity to the immigrant and the poor. Boaz is so impressed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi. He prays for her that God will reward her for her boldness. So Ruth comes home that day, and Naomi finds out that she met Boaz, and she is thrilled. She says Boaz is their family redeemer. Now, this family redeemer thing, this was a cultural practice in Israel, where if a man in the family died and he left behind a wife or children or land, it was the family redeemer's responsibility to marry that widow, to take up the land and protect that family. So Naomi, she begins to hope that perhaps there might still be a future for her family. Chapter 3 begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan to get Boaz to notice their situation. So Ruth is going to stop wearing clothes of a grieving widow, and she's going to show signs that she's available to be married. And so Ruth goes to meet Boaz on the farm that night. And as she approaches, Boaz wakes up, and he's totally startled. And Ruth makes her intentions very clear. She asks if Boaz will redeem Naomi's family and marry her. Boaz is once again amazed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and her family, and he calls Ruth a woman of noble character. It's the the same term used to describe the woman of Proverbs 31. So Boaz tells Ruth to wait until the next day, and he will redeem both Ruth and Naomi legally before the town elders. And so the chapter ends with Ruth returning to Naomi, and they marvel together at all of these recent events. In chapter 4, it all comes together. It turns out, at the last minute, Boaz discovers there is a family member who's closer to Naomi than he is, and he's actually eligible before him to redeem the family. But at the last second, this family member finds out that he's going to have to marry Ruth, the Moabite, and so he declines. But Boaz, remember, he knows Ruth's true character, and so he acquires the family property of Naomi, and he marries Ruth. And so just at the beginning, how Ruth was loyal to Naomi's family, so now Boaz is loyal to Naomi's family as well. The story concludes with a reversal of all of the tragedies from chapter 1. So the death of the husband and the sons is reversed as Ruth is married again and gives birth to a new son, granting joy to Naomi. And this symmetry between the opening and the closing, it's even more remarkable. So remember, the opening tragedy was followed by a great act of loyalty on the part of Ruth. And that is now matched by Boaz's act of loyalty that leads to the family's final restoration. And this symmetry, it highlights the design of the internal chapters as well. So each of the chapters begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan for their future. And that's followed by a providential meeting between Ruth and Boaz. And each chapter concludes with Naomi and Ruth rejoicing at what's taken place. This story is beautifully designed. And that design actually connects with a really interesting feature of the story. And that's how little God is mentioned. Right? The characters talk about God a few times, but the narrator actually never once mentions God doing anything directly in the story. And that's its brilliance. Because God's providence is at work behind every scene of this story, weaving together the circumstances and choices of all these characters. So Naomi, her tragedy leads her to think that God is punishing her, but actually the whole story is about God's mission to restore her and her family. And he's doing so through Ruth, through her boldness and loyalty, which brings healing to Naomi's life, but not without Boaz, who's a no-nonsense farmer who's full of generosity and loyalty. And so God uses his integrity combined with Ruth's boldness to save Naomi and her family. And so this story brilliantly explores the interplay of God's purposes and will with human decision and will. God weaves together the faithful obedience of his people to bring about his redemptive purposes in the world. And that leads to the real end of the story. The book of Ruth concludes with a genealogy, showing how Boaz and Ruth's son, Obed, was the grandfather of King David, from whom came the lineage of the Messiah. And so all of a sudden, these seemingly mundane, ordinary events in this story are woven into God's grand story of redemption for the whole world. And so the book of Ruth invites us to consider how God might be at work in the very ordinary, mundane details of our lives as well. And that's what the book of Ruth is all about.
Who remembers something that they learned about Ruth's story or the book of Ruth? Yes.
There was this, she was very loyal and wanted to stay with Naomi
Naomi?
the whole entire time.
Yes.
She said, okay, but Naomi's actually also Maya.
You're right. Yeah, Ruth was really loyal to Naomi. Were they related, really? Not really. Once all the guys in that family died, there's nothing left that keeps them related. But they were chosen family. So they definitely loved each other, and they showed that love through loyalty. Some people think they were in love with each other. We don't know, but we know that they loved and cared about each other, and they were loyal to each other in their chosen family. So you guys did a really good job of talking about loyalty and family. Who else remembers something from the book, from the story of Ruth? Who remembers where Ruth is from? That's a really tricky part. It's hard to remember, yeah. Moab. Now, do Israelites normally like Moabites? No. So, why was Naomi's family in Moab if they don't like it there? Do Do you remember? They had to go at the very beginning. They had to go at the very beginning of the story. Do you remember why? Anybody remember why? There was a famine. What's a famine? Yeah. They ran out of food in Israel. So Naomi's family went to Moab and must have been friendly because their sons married Moabites, right? So they must have been pretty nice to them. And so then, how come Naomi is going to go back? Does anyone remember? Why does Naomi decide to go back? What do you think? Yeah, because when her husband or son dies. Okay, here's the thing about this story. You can talk about it more with your folks in your small group. The story is really weird for us because in our world, ladies do not have to be married to have a job or a house. But back then, you really did. Only guys were allowed to own homes, and only guys were allowed to make money. So if you didn't have a husband or a brother or a son or a father, like women without a guy relative were completely stuck. There was no way that they could legally make money. Well, no, nice way that they could legally make money. And there was no way for them to have a house. Women were not allowed to live on their own without men living with them. I'm sorry, it's just true. We don't have enough time to talk about why. So Naomi and Ruth really, really love each other, and they want to be a family, but they're not allowed to be a family on their own without any boys. So they just don't have a lot of choices, right? How are they going to live together and be families? You usually lived with all your cousins would live together back then. All your aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins would all live together. It's just these two ladies. So what do they come up with? What's their big plan of how they're going to eat food and live and find a house? They got a crazy idea. What is it? What is it? What is it? Yeah. One of them has to get married. Okay. So they're going to try and do that. But Boaz is someone in this, who's Boaz? What is something that describes him? Is he a nice guy? Is he a weirdo? Like he's marrying some random foreign lady? Is he a nice guy? What do you think? Anybody know? Boaz? Yeah. How is Boaz loyal too? It did write down loyal. That means you were watching. That is a good thing to say. This is confusing, but Boaz was loyal to these people. He didn't know them. They just showed up from a different country. He's loyal to what? Do you remember? It's super confusing. What do you think? What do you think? Yeah. Yes. Good. Way back, God had given them rules that they always had to take care of widows, orphans, and foreigners. No other countries had those rules. So if your husband died, nobody took care of you, they didn't care. If your parents died, nobody took care of you, they didn't care. If you were a foreigner in another land, there were no protections. They had nothing to help them. This whole story, okay. Fantastic. The whole story sounds weird to us and super anti-feminist and very not okay for the 21st century. But Israel in this story actually comes out on top because they're the one that actually, Boaz is actually nice to them and makes sure they have food and follows all the rules. And there are lots of options for these women to live with dignity. So I know that doesn't sound like it when you're reading this story. So it's something you can talk about in your small group. Yeah. Oh, that's a really important point. So Boaz already owned a lot of stuff because he's a big farmer. But it turns out Naomi had this relative with a farm somewhere else. And whoever married Ruth would get that piece of land because it would go to Ruth's son. Right? So there's this family property that they own. And whoever marries Ruth gets the land. How come everybody else is just signing up to marry her? You're going to be super rich. All you got to do is marry Ruth. She seems like a cute gal. She's very nice. She's hardworking. How come she doesn't have 10 people wanting to marry her? Think. What does she have going against her? She seems lovely. The Bible says she's great. How come nobody else marrying her? Because she's Moab. She is a Moabite, which means what? Ugly? Stupid? They just don't like her. They just don't like the Moabites. They don't care if she's rich. They don't care if she's loyal and nice. They just don't like her. So they're not going to do it. So why would Boaz do it? Why is Boaz going to marry her if she's so, Moabite? Yeah. He is a cool guy. Good answer. Yes, because he's a super cool guy. And because it turns out the Bible never said they were supposed to hate Moabites or the Midianites or anybody else, right? So Boaz is following the actual rules of God, which say you're supposed to take care of widows and orphans and foreigners, and they're all of them, right? These, Naomi and Ruth are all of those things. So Boaz is a good guy. He's faithful to God. Yeah, good. Okay, quiz show. Quiz show. Ooh, I think Stu's group can do the quiz show. Are you ready? Yep, you can. You can do it. I know you've been listening this whole time. You're like the strong silent types back here. Let's try it. Ready? Ready? Okay, don't whisper any hints. The story of Ruth and Naomi takes place in the days when Moses ruled, the judges ruled, David ruled, or Jesus ruled. Now, Jesus always rules, but like we're talking historically.
B.
Yay! Everyone give a round of applause. That is correct. Where was Ruth originally from? Bethlehem, India, Moab, Israel. Also complicated. We're talking Ruth. Ruth.
C.
Yes, good job. Ruth is from Moab. Now, Ruth tells Naomi's her mother-in-law, but once the boys die, they're like not related at all. Ruth says, your people shall be my people, and your God shall love you more than me, shall shower us with gifts, shall provide food for us, shall be my God. What do we think?
D.
Yes, that one sounds the most biblical. When Boaz, that's the guy, first met Ruth, what was Ruth doing? I don't know. Oh, it barely said this. There was a little tiny picture of it. This might be tricky. Was she gathering leftover grain, washing his feet, cooking him dinner, shopping to buy a used camel? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
A.
Yes. There was actually a rule back then. You had to leave grain for the widows and orphans to come and get them. And so Boaz left extra because, he's a nice guy. Okay, Ruth marries Elimelech, Perez, Boaz, Moses. You know this. You know this.
C.
Yes, good. And Ruth is an ancestor of, that means Ruth came first, this other person came later, but in the family. David, Jesus, Moses, or two of them. Ooh, this one's tricky. It was at the very end of the video. This one's hard. Take a guess. Ooh, we're handing it off to our friend. David, Jesus, Moses. All right, you want to ask the audience? Who thinks David? Raise your hand. Who thinks Jesus? Who thinks Moses? Who thinks David and Jesus? Yes, because David and Jesus are also related. So, the story is in the Bible long after it happened because people still hated Moabites a long time later. They just didn't really get over this hating other people thing. The story's in the Bible. Why? Why do you think they put the story? It's just two people get married having a baby. That happens every day. And not like a biblical, exciting thing. So why did they put in there? Why is it in the Bible? We have all this judges and all this chaos. Why are we going to put in a story about a lady from Moab and some Bible, Because peace and stuff. Also, you're right. You are on the right track. Yeah. Generosity. Yes. Loyalty. Yes. That's okay. It's just a piece of paper. Yeah. Yes. You are right. That's very important. And Ruth is not Hebrew or Jewish. God's family includes the whole world, right? We don't have to hate anyone because everyone is, part of God's family, which we now know. Thank you. And it shows that loyalty and faithfulness matters a lot, even if your family's a little cuckoo, because there's a lot of cuckoos in stories in the Bible. But these families really have a lot of faithfulness. So I'm super over, but you did a great job. So, Stu. Yeah.
God takes care of us.
Yes. Also that. I'm glad you said it, Stu. That's what I should have said. No matter how bad things get, God will take care of you. And Ruth and Naomi trusted God the whole time. They talk about God a lot, even though nobody else in the book does. Yeah, it's huge. Okay, so you get to chat with your folks in your small groups. You might talk about the 4 chapters or not. You might talk about something else, whatever works for you all. Are we good? Go do a thing. Talk to your groups. I get to hang out with this group. Do we want to go to Bye Friends Online?